Hey everybody, welcome to a brand new episode of Deeply Rooted. This is episode 84. We're really excited about this conversation today. I think you guys are going to enjoy this. This is going to kick off our September series called September Stories, and we're going to be diving into some people's lives and letting them kind of share with us basically what the Lord has done for them and what they're doing right now, not just at conversion, but what's happened since then and how we can kind of glean from that and benefit from it. So I think you guys are really going to enjoy this. Don't forget, if you haven't done so, check us out on our YouTube channel and on Apple Podcast. You can hit that subscribe button there. Leave us a review. You can also find us on our Facebook group page. If you haven't joined that so far, you can keep up with all things Deeply Rooted through that. And you can find us on our website at deeplyrootedpodcast.com. You'll find all the archived episodes, our blog posts are on there, and upcoming ministry schedule as well. So lots of good things involved in Deeply Rooted. If you want to get in touch with us, you can email us at drigw18@gmail.com. Again, that's drigw18@gmail.com. Now, with all that out of the way, really excited to have my good buddy on today. I'm glad he picked up the phone and actually responded to me. I didn't know. We hadn't talked in a long time. But I'm really glad to have on the episode today my friend Britten Olinger. Britten is the assistant track coach at Montreat College in Black Mountain, North Carolina. He's married to his lovely wife, Samantha. They're proud parents of two beautiful kids. And Britten, man, thanks for being on, man. I appreciate this.
Hey, man, it's a pleasure.
I'm trying to remember. You might be able to help me out. Where did we meet? I know we met in college, but I don't remember the circumstances of how we met.
That's a good question. Because weren't you and Mark the same age?
Yeah, our good friend Mark, Estep, we were good friends. I know we had history classes together, you and I. I got to tell this great story about you really quick. This is going to embarrass both of us, but that's okay.
Oh,
so we were in class one day, and Britten's sitting right in front of me, and we had a substitute teacher that year because our original teacher got sick. And the gentleman that filled in, I'll just say he was a different bird. Let's put it that way. But the man wore pants literally up to his chest line. And I'm not exaggerating, literally to the chest line. And Britten just simply leans back to me one day, really casually. And he's like, "Hey, Reiner, do you think he gets his wallet normally, just reaching behind his hip? Or do you think he reaches over his shoulder to grab his wallet?" Well, I was undone at that point because all I could think about was all the different scenarios where this guy would actually walk up to a counter somewhere and then try to grab his wallet like that. So that's probably the first memory that I have of us, on top of a bunch of other ones that we can probably get into. But, man, I'm really excited to talk to you again today. It's been a long time since we had a chance to check up. But I want to go back and sort of fill in the gaps here for everybody that may not know you, or the ones that may know you already that are listening and may not know everything about some of the ways that you kind of navigated to where you're at today. But as far as family background goes, was church something that was always a part of your life, or is that something that came into your life later?
Church growing up was kind of a give and go, touch and go, I should say. We grew up Christian faith, but we never really we attended churches, but not on a regular basis. We would go to my grandparents' church all the time, or we had some local churches we would visit and go to, but never necessarily on a regular base. We never really had a church family per se, but it was also too hard because growing up, it was just my sister and my dad. So he worked a ton of different different jobs, different shifts. So for a lot of times, my dad would work a third night, the night shift, and he'd get up at 7 o'clock in the morning. So by the time you're getting up to go to church, he's going to bed. So it was very, very little church going on.
Did you like it when you went, though, even as a kid? Is that something that stood out to you, or was it more just kind of, well, I'll take it or leave it. If it happens, it does. If it doesn't, oh well.
It was tough because I think you always tell people now, you need to find a church home that you feel welcomed or you really enjoy going. And that was, I think for me, some of the churches that we went to, they were my favorite. This is a terrible story, but I'll go ahead. Since everyone's here about tickets, but yeah, one time. So my dad was actually named Officer of the Year after he was kind of the first to arrive on the scene. He was actually on the scene when a bank robbery happened.
Okay.
And so like his car, when he chased the bank robber down, he pulls off this random road, and the guy pulls out with an AK-47 and like lights his car up and like this, remember everything. But my dad ends up running. He goes off in the woods, and my dad ends up catching him and stuff like that.
Wow.
But he ends up being named like Officer of the Year in this state or something. But I remember this happened like during a week. So we actually went to church on that Sunday, and the pastor goes, "Hey, Mike, I guess an announcement. Like, hey, Mike, I'm glad to see you here." In front of everyone, I guess it took like your car being shot up to get you back to church or something. I was probably like right at a freshman at the time, and I was kind of like, "Oh, okay, that's." But it was like, I don't know, my dad was really turned off by it, but I was like, it's one of those moments like, people always have those stories of like church kind of hits their own nerve.
Right.
But it wasn't all just that particular church. But I had a lot of friends who grew up with in other churches, so I would go with them. I had a lot of great experiences in church, and it was really about finding the right spot. And a lot of times I always go with that friend to the church.
So by the time you get into high school, I mean, obviously you're a pretty active guy. I mean, we played a lot of ball and stuff together when he was in college and stuff, so it's pretty obvious you were athletic and very active.
Oh, don't brag.
Well, I don't want to yet, but but no, you were an active guy. I mean, everybody knew that, and obviously that's part of your story. But what about like the conversion story though? Like, what was going on there spiritually that got you to the point and said, "Hey, you know what? I need to be saved. Like, this is obvious, and I've got to be with the Lord."
For one, I think it was going into it was my freshman year, going into my freshman year that summer. I went to a Young Life camp, actually not far from here, Windy Gap. That summer, I got through the gospel really for the first time. Because a lot of what I heard prior to was a lot of just basically a checklist.
Yeah.
And essentially, do this, do that, don't lie, don't cuss, don't say the Lord's name in vain, listen to your parents. That was it. There was no things based around the thought of love.
Right.
That was the intimacy in that. So I got to finally hear, I guess, the raw gospel story and what that really meant, and got to hear the way it was told for the first time. And that really affected me. I actually remember going out they gave you like some time that night to go out and kind of like, I guess if you want to pray, you can pray, whatever you want to do. And that was the night I asked for the Lord to save me. And that was a big thing for me. And it was just, man, and that basically started my journey, my walk. And the next, 4 years through high school was me trying to figure out, like, how do you navigate this?
Right.
Because I didn't have a church really the foundation into, so it was really like throwing yourself in a pool, not able how to swim, and like, all right, let's figure this out, type of thing. So,
how did your family take that? I know you talked about like you guys were, a little in, a little out, but I mean, like, what was their reaction when you're starting to explain this to them?
They loved it. It's not like my family didn't want to go to church.
Sure.
Like my dad today is like, him and his wife are hugely involved in the church in Chihuahua, and they host all the time. His wife, Tamara, hosts a small group all the time.
Yeah.
And so like it was just something that was never a really big part of our house at the time. And my grandfather even grew up as like kind of like a pastor at the time, but he's your old school fire brim type pastor. He brought the furnace a lot in the pulpit.
Yeah.
So, but like it was that kind of old school church, and so for me to hear the way the gospel was preached to me at the time about there's actually this relationship involved, not necessarily a one way street, and the street being coming from God. It was like, oh wow, I get to have interaction. So they were all for that, and I don't think at the time we already necessarily knew what they looked like. Them, me, and my dad and my sister.
Now, did you hop right into some ministries after that? Were you trying to find a church home, like youth ministries, or something you remember stood out that you started plugging into?
So at the time, about a year later, another guy came along, Dave Wells.
Yeah.
He became a pretty big mentor to me, and all through high school. And I had some friends who were really big into a church, who I would go with them, the churches, and that was kind of like my outlet per se.
Now, I remember even when we met in college, you mentioned Windy Gap. I actually remember us going there one time in college. We took a trip, now that you jog my memory about that, and I believe Dave went with us, if I'm not mistaken, and we took a lot of guys from college. So, yeah, I do remember us being involved in Young Life, and obviously by the time, we get to college, obviously we cross paths, and we're taking somewhat of a similar route with social studies and things like that, and we even worked together as RAs there for a while, and that's probably where we, I guess, really started to get to know each other a little bit better and had some mutual friends. But, we did a lot of BCM and stuff like that, Baptist Collegiate Ministries, and we were really involved there. What do you remember about college and, like, faith growth and all that kind of stuff? Because I know for me, I come out of a pretty fundamental background, and college, I'm not going to say it was like the big slip up, but I was presented with stuff that I don't know if necessarily I was sort of prepared for. You hear the horror stories of the drinking and the drugs and the sexual activity and stuff like that. But there was a lot more than that I think was, for me, probably a little bit more difficult road to navigate through than those, I want to say the big three, but I guess that's how I would categorize that. What about you?
Man, it was different. I was very staunch against, like, I guess your traditionalists growing up. Don't touch alcohol, don't touch that stuff. Even in college, I was kind of really against it, but kind of really getting immersed into it. Like, you've seen it versus hearing it, it's different. So, like, really getting, like, seeing actually what a party even looks like, and you see things on TV, like shows or movies, and the scene is much different than when you're actually there. But I feel like for me in college, there was twofold of actually understanding. Now I'm in this situation where I'm now actually being tested in my faith, and now not only am I being tested, I'm actually being asked about it. So
right,
I can tell people that I'm a Christian and I do all this stuff, but now I actually have to walk the walk, and, like, what does that look like? And am I saying the right things? Am I wearing the right clothes? Am I hanging out with the right people, more or less? And that was huge, and there was a lot of pressure on that. And
right.
I remember sometimes, like, feel like if I would be talking to a group of people, like, thinking, like, how is that perceived by other people that would be in this other social group, that would be, I guess, your quote-unquote Christian, your more religious type. Like, how is that perceived? This group I'm talking to might be the Wild Bunch. But, like, that was huge things that really tested me in terms of, like, if I'm talking about this guy named God, this fella named Jesus, and do I really believe what he says? Do I walk the way he says I should walk? Am I looking at others the way I should be looking? Is my thought process the same way? So it really forced me to actually start becoming more. I don't know, this sounds cliche, more Christ-like.
Right.
Because I really had to start. Because then I really started getting tested. I tested the whole college, like going to parties, or the whole the opposite sex, those things, and that was a huge thing, temptation. That I don't care how well you think you are in your faith when you go out to these events or when you go to college. It's real life, man.
Sure.
It all hits people differently, and you don't know how you're going to react till you get there, and a lot of times it's pretty deep, pretty harsh.
Yeah, I think it's a real eye opener for some people that may have came from a little bit more sheltered area, and I don't mean that in a bad sense. Like there's nothing wrong with living in a small town and avoiding a lot of bad situations. I would obviously encourage anybody to do that, but you're right though. When you're thrust into this, and you do have to go to class around these people, you work with these people, you're at these events with these people. There are times it's just unavoidable. Here you are, you're kind of in the lion's den, and we're going to find out, like when you say that, yes, Lord, I've pledged my allegiance to you, we're about to find out is, put your money where your mouth is, so to speak. And, I keep going back to this one verse that's really rung true for me over the last probably half decade or more. But, when Jesus says, if you love me, keep my commandments. And I look back on that and I think, man, like you said, I said that I loved him, but was I biblical? Did I line up with his standard, which is really the only one that mattered? I mean, I could give you 1,000 opinions on things, but at the end of the day, I'm not Lord. I'm not Savior. I didn't die for anybody. I didn't resurrect for anybody. We have one head of the church, and it's not Jeremiah, and it's not Britten, and have we submitted to him? And you're right. I think college was a real proving ground for a lot of people. And by the grace of God, I think here we are today. I mean, I'm not a fool. I'm not going to try to take credit for that. Here we are talking still after all these years, and God's been faithful like he always has. And, I think there were lessons that we all learned. We went through days that, I look back and think, man, I wished I would have been wiser, but at the same time, I don't know if I had any wisdom, and that's what God was doing, was proving that to me and getting me on board. So, I'm with you on that.
I think there's a lot of holding your feet to the furnace.
Sure.
Like, there's so many situations, like, that you just really have to screw it up until you really come, like, kind of know him. Like, we look at the disciples, for example. Like, how many times did they really get it wrong?
Yeah.
Like, a lot. And it was like, man. But that was his people. That was his crew, man. That was his squad. That's who he ran with. And that was like, he knew that. Like, he knew that group wasn't going to be perfect. But the whole point is, like, that's what brought me to really, that showed me who Jesus was his willingness to be able to walk with me. It's like, you're going to screw this up really bad. Like, oh my God, bad. Like, let me tell you. But I'm going to walk you through that. And I'm probably have to pull you out a few times and smack you across the face, but we're going to get through this. And that was a side that I'd never even heard before. So
let's shift gears here really quick, and talk a little bit about your personal life. Did you meet Sam in college, or was that something that kind of happened later?
That happened right as my going out and her coming in.
Okay.
So we're about 4 years apart.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there was not like this. We met, and she's from Virginia Beach, so it wasn't ever. It was. I had no intentions of dating my wife at the time. At that time, we were talking, but it was just crazy how it all worked out.
She just couldn't resist the great looks.
I know. I put down the vibe, and she couldn't.
Yeah, that's pretty similar to my wife and I. About the 4-year apart range. So I get where you're coming from there. So as you guys are dating and stuff like that, how long after you graduate before you guys are actually married?
Gosh, we married in 2014.
Okay.
So we actually dated for a while. And the reason being was I moved to Harrisonburg.
Okay.
And so she was finishing up school. And so we had talked about marriage, but I wasn't necessarily sure. I was sure that we wanted to get married, but I wasn't necessarily wanting to put the pressure on, let's get married while you're in school.
Right.
It's a bit of the process. So, but I remember when I went to her dad and asked if I got permission to marry your daughter. And her dad's 30-year Marine vet. And of course, he was like, "It's about dang time." I was like, "Yeah, is that a yes? I want to make sure." So, but yeah, it was. We dated for quite a few years. So.
Now, you mentioned going up to Harrisonburg. Did you start an education career there, or did you immediately get into more of the track and field aspect of things and was doing other stuff on the side?
So I started the track and field thing there. I went up there with Luke Woods for that particular job.
So it's Jason Lukewitz for anybody not listening. Jason, by the way, to backtrack all this, technically gave us jobs in college, so he would have been our director as we're RAs. But anyhow, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
he gave me the job up there for that. But I did I did some teaching. Not really. I worked in a special education classroom for a year there at a Broadway high school. So I did that, and then I came more full time on after that year.
Were you still in special education, or did they graft you into some other department?
That time I went into the to the college.
Gotcha.
So I just basically worked. I would say I just coached, but I coached, and I did a lot of kind of odd jobs. I delivered newspapers for like a year.
Wow.
So waking up at like 4 o'clock in the morning was always fun.
Now, how did you find your way? Because currently I mentioned in the introductory here that you guys live in Black Mountain now, and we were talking, before we came on the episode, a little bit of background. I'm pretty familiar with Black Mountain, just as some family history there. But how did you guys make your way down to Black Mountain, North Carolina?
So Jason took the job down here in 2015.
And that's at Montreat College, right?
At Montreat. And this is while we're at Eastern Mennonite in Harrisonburg.
Okay.
So he took the job down here, and I actually stayed up there and became the director of the track team there. And then the following year, while I'm still up there, he calls me out of the blue and says, "Hey, we're going to be needing a coach soon. Would you want to come down and take that position if it's available?" And at the time, I had no reason to. Like, I was up there, established. Not even that. My wife at the time was about 4 weeks of being popping out a baby.
Okay.
So, can you imagine going to your wife and saying, "Hey, before we have our firstborn, would you want to take a job and move, 7 hours away?" So, we had a conversation, and come to find out the job was opening. So, came down here and interviewed, and that's how we ended up down here. So we moved down here with a 2-month-old.
Wow.
So that was a crazy exchange in itself, but it was something we felt like God was just calling us here. It wasn't like God was saying, "Get out of Harrisonburg." It just felt like this is where I need to be. So,
now, as far as Sam's career path, what field is she involved in?
So she went to vet school for a year, and then she says because of me, because she was so in love with me. No, but because of she ended up leaving vet school so we can be married for the at the time. She was actually planning to go back to vet school, potentially NC State, but that's me. We'll talk about that in a little bit. I guess the accident happened, kind of put that on. But she works now with a local gym. She works at the school system where our kid goes in.
Yeah.
Our kids go to, and she works part-time at a lab for the detention center.
Okay. So you're down in Black Mountain, you're involved there with track and field and stuff, and you're hooked back up with Jason, a good friend of ours. And you alluded to that just a second ago, and that was kind of where I was headed next. But I mean, I don't know any other way to transition into this. I guess just to dive into it. But for those of you, listening that don't know Britten, we'll talk about this next part of his life. I mean, obviously, nobody in a gazillion years would ever plan for this, but basically walk everybody through, I guess, just what happened, and then we'll kind of go from there about like recovery and where you've kind of made it to today. So
so I moved down here 2016 July-ish. Fast forwarding to February 27th, 2017. I was coming back from essentially track practice. I had just dropped off a few athletes from track practice at the dorms after track practice. And the school in my house is probably about 3 miles apart, so we're not really that far. And I was driving back right through the main part of town. I was at a red light, and the light turned green, and I was making my way across. I was the first car through, and making my way across the intersection, and a car T-boned me, and that car was driving 120 miles per hour. And the crazy part, the speed limit through that part of town is actually just 20.
Yeah.
And I mean, even at 20, it kind of felt like you're going too fast because the town is very touristy. A lot of people in that part of town.
Yeah, very rural community. I mean, to put that in people's minds, I mean, this is, if you're living in Southwest Virginia, Northeast Tennessee, I mean, this is what we're used to. So,
the guy just hits me right on the driver's side, right behind the driver's side, and I'm spinning a few 360s, and hitting the car perpendicular to me, and I had like golf clubs and stuff in the back of my Mazda, and it shot through the door, or through the I guess store window and everything. The impact was so hard they hit me. My golf clubs were actually found embedded into the wall in the back of the store. So yeah, that was at the time I got hit, and it left me paralyzed from the neck down. I don't feel anything from the chest down, but if you get into the scientific side, C7 anatomy part. But I don't have any remembrance of the accident. About a few days prior to the accident, I don't remember. And I have little bits and pieces of the day of the accident, but not up to the accident. And I don't have any memory for the next month. So
wow.
My only memory I have is when I start coming through, and that's at the Shepherd Center, which has been a month past I'd been in the hospital. So
I'm assuming they air flighted you immediately, or was this an ambulance drive to the closest hospital?
So there's a lot of miraculous stuff about the incident. One of a few big ones is where the accident happened. About 150 meters from where the accident happened was where the fire department, rescue squad, police department's right there.
Right.
So not only that, they were actually out on the front parking lot of them doing a training.
Wow. So
when the accident happened, they heard it and saw it. So there was no need for 911. They were there within seconds. So that was a big thing. And two, there were multiple cars involved. That my car hit another car, that hit another car, plus his car. So there was multiple vehicles, and because of the multiple vehicles, there should have been technically a triage created. So each person goes and they get checked on, and the person who's not deemed able to survive, they kind of pass over that person so they can check everyone else. At the time, my doors in my car were locked, but some reason my door was wide open. I was hanging out the side of it, and one of the paramedics actually didn't stop at me. He stopped, and the rest of them went around. He stopped to stay with me, and he started doing CPR because at the time I was technically dead for like 6 minutes. So he had to resuscitate me, the paddles, all that stuff. So that was another pretty big, just a miraculous part of that. Is the fact that I wasn't. If they would have passed over me and came back to me, a another minute longer, the lack of oxygen in my brain would have made a brain injury pretty severe.
Right.
But no, there was actually, I'm only, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes in the hospital. So it was med flight. They threw me straight in the ambulance and I went straight there. So it was, in terms of timing of everything, it was pretty good.
Now, from that point, is there any surgery that night performed, or is it more just getting you stable from that point on?
It was more so getting me stable. I had a collapsed lung. That was a big thing. If you walked into the emergency room, you looked at me, you couldn't tell anything was wrong with me because of I had a pretty big gash on my head when I hit the window. Besides that, like the physical aspect, you couldn't tell much, but I had multiple fractures on the spine, and my right lung was collapsed, and I broke my left arm too. But they were basically trying to see if my lung would inflate, and that was basically my survival depended on that. So I didn't really actually have my spinal surgery until like a few days later. So, but since, I've had a lot of surgery since.
Now, you mentioned going to the Shepherd Center. This is a place I have heard of before, but just for everybody that may not be familiar, explain, where you went to and what they're doing down there.
Shepherd Center is it's a phenomenal place. It's in Atlanta. It's a rehabilitation center mainly for people with brain injuries, spinal injuries. So they do rehabilitation for people with spinal cord, and I went down there at the end of March, so that's why I entered into Shepherd Center. I was down there from March till about the second week of June doing rehab there, and the goal is to try and get you to be able to, when you leave rehab, how can you the new normal, they call it, suffice as a new normal, and they try to educate you as much as possible what to expect and everything. But it was amazing. They're absolutely phenomenal there.
How about Sam and your daughter? I mean, like, what was going on there during all this?
Man, so everything I'm telling you is all what's been told back to me.
Sure.
So, like, their experience with this accident was just completely different than what I tell you, because they had to live it. It was a nightmare, as she puts it, and she got a phone call. The accident happened about close to 7. She got a phone call about almost closer to 9. Well, no, around 8. And because I had just talked to her not long before that. Asked her, hey, I'm coming home later. Do you pick up Taco Bell?
Right.
And so yeah. So it's taking me like 5 minutes. And so I come home. She had been calling me. And so she saw an 828 number, which is a local number, pop up. And she answered, and as soon as she answered, she knew she was going to the hospital. So, and the first people that actually came to me at the hospital were the chaplain and a surgeon. And usually if a chaplain meets you, it's usually not good.
Sure, yeah.
So, and that was like, first thing came to our mind was like, is he dead?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it was pretty. And my daughter, she was 9 months when it happened, and a lot of stuff like it was tough for her because my my phone is filled with pictures. It was her and I making faces on the cell phone and using Snapchat filters. But like, I have these shoes I always wear around the house, and she's like, when the dogs would bark at the door, that's when she knew I was home. So she would always run back to the door or call back to the door. And Daddy's home. It's like Mom's like, no, he's not here. So it was tough, and them having to transit. They lived down in Atlanta with me for 3 months, and so for the better part of her first 3 years of her life was pretty. Young kids are pretty resilient, but I couldn't imagine how that would have been.
Yeah, no doubt. Now, walk me through something else, because this is something I've always been interested in. I mentioned you have 2 kids. So explain to us, I guess, kind of the backdrop there, like you had another one on the way, or?
Yeah. So I actually had another one. So, funny story. When the accident happened, I remember I said I had no memory of the accident. So but one of my first memories is being at the Shepherd Center, and my wife's holding the phone up to my head, and I was on speaker call for whatever reason. Well, at the time, I didn't know why, but I know why now. But and they were talking about something. I hear someone say, "Congratulations, it's a boy," and I'm like, "What's a boy? Like, what are you talking about?" And they're like, and she's like, "Don't you remember I'm pregnant?" And first thing in my head was like, "How long was I out? Like, what the heck happened?" And so, but Sam, my wife, she was pregnant about a little bit more than a month prior to the act. Well, I found out a little bit more than a month prior to the accident. But she was too much pregnant for the accident. And I couldn't remember. I had no idea. So it was a whole, it was a shock when it first found out. That was even more of a shock the second time. But they actually thought, a few of the doctors didn't know if Easton would actually survive the pregnancy just because of this trauma and stress of everything she's going through. Is her husband going to make it, and traveling like crazy, and it being like so early on in the pregnancy. So, but lo and behold, he survived, which didn't surprise me after I saw the fall he had yesterday, and he pops back up and was like, "Hey, what's up, guys?" So now I get it. But yeah, no, it was that whole ordeal finding out that she was pregnant again was quite the shock. So
now, you mentioned a term, "new normal," a minute ago. So you hear you guys come back to Black Mountain. Explain new normal to me. Like, what does that look like now?
Man, coming back to Black Mountain, it was difficult because Black Mountain in Nashville is very outdoorsy.
Sure.
Like, if you don't have a REI sticker in your car, you don't fit in. So it's your typical outdoorsy area. And here I am, it's one of the reasons why I came down here. It's, big family place and getting outdoors, have your kids to grow up in it. And coming back to an area, you're kind of, you're destined to a chair with wheels. And you're very limited on where you go, especially a town, an area that's not accessible with people in wheelchairs. So that was tough, trying to figure out what this life was going to look like, and how are you going to raise 2 kids, being a dad in a wheelchair. Like, you're not necessarily going to get out and throw baseball with your kids or play on a trampoline or something. So that's been a pretty ongoing process, trying to figure things out there. It's a lot better off than what it was 4 years ago.
Sure.
That's for sure. It was a lot to chew on then, but it was difficult coming back. As free as it was to be at the hospital, it was definitely pretty dark.
Did you guys have to make a lot of modifications to your house and vehicles and things like that, or was that something you just sort of have adapted to a little differently?
We were very lucky about the school had a few people that took the reins on redoing our house, doing a lot of modifications. We had a ton of support, monetarily through people's donations. So they came in and we had just bought the house, 3 months prior to the accident. And people came in and basically gutted our house, and we did our bedroom, made the doors a little more wider for wheelchairs, and we had an addition. So we had a car garage. So they basically turned that into a bedroom. So then added a ramp to our porch, and our bathroom, added another bathroom, but one that I can actually get into.
Right.
So it's kind of like a roll in. So they did a lot of that, and the Shepherds did a really good job in telling us, like, what you're going to need. You're going to need a vehicle that you can get into. So we got like an accessible van. And so there was a pretty big, I think, we still find things today that we're like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I didn't know about this.
Yeah.
A few years ago. So there's always, and that's just even being on like Facebook groups, and like someone who's been a spinal cord patient injury for 30 years, like, oh, this is what I use. I'm like, why didn't I think of that? So
right.
It's pretty ongoing.
Now, to make us all feel like about an inch tall here, you went back to work, still coaching, and from what I gathered, I mean, I might be wrong here, you can correct me, but you guys are pretty successful down there under the old Coach Olinger, from what I can gather.
No, it's that was one of the big things that I feel like how feeling back to normal would feel like, that I needed to get back to coaching.
Yeah.
And like, just because, I don't know, it's a sense of peace, I guess, that I feel like I'm doing something that I knew prior to the accident. It's still the same. So that was, I got back into coaching that August. I coached that year, but I wasn't out of the hospital a lot that first year because of pneumonia. I had about 6 bouts of pneumonia. So my son was born in September. Up until February, I had been in the hospital more times than my son. I'd actually worked physically with my son. So it was pretty tough. And the number one killer for spinal cord injuries is pneumonia.
Wow.
Because your inability to actually cough, because it affects your diaphragm so much. So that was huge, huge thing. But I got back into coaching, really, really get back into it the following year. But yeah, we've been successful. I think we won 5 championships. So it's been one of the reasons why I came down was to build a program and be able to build a successful program, while at the same time kind of mentoring young people. That was the draw. So I'm finally getting to do it just from a different vantage point. So.
What kind of platform has this gave you to minister? I mean, I'm sure you get asked a lot of questions. You've probably had a chance to speak, if I was guessing, at some pretty decent little venues or in front of people and stuff. But like, what's God used this to do?
Man, I remember laying in the rehab center one night. I didn't sleep well. You can imagine you don't actually sleep that well for a while.
Sure.
But I was sitting here like, don't let this be in vain. Like, I know things happen, and I'm really trying to make my vocabulary not say the accident, because I don't want people like, oh, it was an accident. But at the same time, too, I'm not saying God did things for a reason. I don't think necessarily works that way. But I am where I am, and God is taking me where I need to be. He's walking me through that. And so He's given me a pretty big platform to be able to just put some teeth behind some things I say every now and then.
Yeah.
And that to show that people that we're not necessarily we we all have some pretty tragic backstories. That there's a lot of bad stuff out there in this world, and believe it or not, it's pretty broken.
Yeah.
And that bad things are going to happen, and that we have the ability to get through that. And how do we get through that? And where do we necessarily look where does our hope come from? It talks about in just got the Bible verse. Give me a second, I'll tell you. In 2 Corinthians, it talks about 4:7-11. It talks about like we're jars of clay, and that's essentially what we are. And the passage says, "But we have these treasures in jars of clay to show that this is all surpassing power from God and not from us. We are hard pressed on every side, but not crushed, perplexed, but not in despair, persecuted, but not abandoned, struck down, but not destroyed. We're always carried around in our body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may be revealed." That's been something that I've really gone to over the last few years, and especially talking about hard pressed on both sides and struck down, but the whole point is like that God's life is revealed through mine. His glory is coincidentally through my accident. Like, how do you find glory? How do you find Jesus in something that's so tragic and dark and should destroy families and someone's life and livelihood, but at the same time, it's like, why shouldn't it? So, like, to be able to, how do I show people that Jesus lives in very dark places? So that's been a big thing.
Sure. Yeah, that's really well said. There's one other question, and you can correct me here, and we can edit this if we need to, but have you had a chance to speak or communicate with the guy that was driving the other vehicle?
I have not. Well, I not directly, not one-on-one.
Mm-hmm.
We had I guess the court, when he went to court and he was pleaded guilty, and we were able to give our witness responses.
Mm-hmm.
And mine is that for him to for this accident not to just be an accident, like you have a chance to make this meaningful. Like, you have a chance to not let this accident decide the rest of your life. Don't let me be in a wheelchair go in vain. Like, I want you to do something with your life and make me 30 years from now be like, you know what? Good for him. And that was such I'm not actually going to talk face to face. Now, how I feel about feel towards him is a little bit different. Say my family or my wife per se, because they have to walk through a little different passage.
Right.
They've had to see a lot of different things than I have. Actually, have to, it's different having to be there when it's on your husband might not make it through the night, or your son might not make it through the night. But yeah, we've not been able to directly talk. So.
Well, man, I'm telling you, this is going to help people. Like, I mean, I know that, a lot of people listening to this probably don't know you. We're just obviously in a little bit different circles, and that's fine. But I don't think God allowed our paths to cross randomly.
No.
I think he's sovereign. I think he obviously clearly is way above what we're doing. He told the prophet Isaiah, "My ways are above your ways." And sometimes I don't get things. Sometimes I'm with you. Like, I tend to want to get angry about stuff and confused. But I think you had the line of the interview for sure. It's not in vain. It's not going to be in vain. And I hope people get that from this. I think they will. And it may not be a situation like you're going through, but like you said, we live in a broken world, and people are going through things, and some of them much worse than others sometimes as far as the circumstance. And it affects other people. Like you have a wife, you have 2 kids, you have family, you have student athletes that look up to you that were huge in your life, and coworkers, and we could go down the line, church members. But I think the big thing, coming out of this is that God's going to get His glory, and I'm really glad to be a part of that, because I would hate to think that I lived this entire life knowing all the things I knew, experiencing all the things I have, and I never was a part of His glory. I just think what a wasted life. And sometimes things happen that we don't understand completely, but we're in the process of bringing Him glory. And that, to me, is living. Like, that is the height of existence, to bring God glory. So
Yeah. That's, people oftentimes will say, well, it's not what you're going through, or it's not what you experience. And I tell them all the time, man, pain is pain.
Sure.
Like, you can put on a scale between 1 and 10, but it's pain. That's classifies it. And I don't think, I don't know if I would go back and want to relive it again, but I don't think God would have revealed Himself. At least I would have never noticed God reveal Himself as much to me as I would have then. Like, as much as God has shown Himself through His grace and mercy and His power and strength has been relentless, and just being able to lift up our family. And there's things and times that I'm able to just praise Him about that I've never even noticed or even taken for granted before. Like, it's crazy knowing that something so significant in your life can kind of turn the dial a little bit just so you can see Him better. When people think, oh, that's so tragic, I'm like, is it?
Right.
Is it really that tragic? So.
Yeah, that's a great point, man. I think it's a good one to leave us out on. I don't know if you had anything here at the end, if you wanted to kind of point people to any kind of organization or something like that, or we kidded before, you can recruit kids to Montreat if you want to wear it out and let them know how to get in touch with you. But is there anything you want to close out with before we wrap it up here?
Not particularly. I know my wife and I are going to be looking to start, part of our foundation is Britten Strong, but looking at potentially getting backpacks together for people down at Shepherd Center for families who are just starting this journey. And that backpack would be filled with, because a lot of families get down there and no place to go. In Atlanta, if you've ever been to Atlanta, it's crazy.
Sure.
They're trying to know this whole new crazy part of life and get them gift certificates, groceries, camel packs for the guy that are little adaptive things they can use for laptops, like it's just stuff you necessarily don't think of when you're down there. That's going to be so useful. So I'm still in touch with a lot of the doctors there. So that's something we're going to be looking to starting to probably do in the next month or two.
Will you guys be needing to raise funds for that personally?
Yeah, we'll be looking to probably we'll need to raise funds. Just put these backpacks together and just find the right families, because they that look these going to really need it. And that's going to be me leading on the doctors there, like, hey, something starts coming in, and they need the support. So.
How could people, let's say people are listening to this right now, want to reach out to other people, how could they get in touch with you to maybe send funds your all's way to help out with that?
They can get to my email, which is BrittenOli@gmail.com, which is BrittenOli@gmail.com. That'd be the best way.
Right.
And then what I'll probably end up doing is send them to my foundation. And our Britten Strong Foundation. You can find that on the website. Just type in Britten Strong Foundation on Google, and it'll pop up.
So. Awesome. Well, man, best of luck to you. I think you're doing literally the Lord's work. I mean, I can't say that enough. I'm glad to talk to you. I'm glad to see you're doing well now, in spite of the circumstances, obviously. But glad it's Sam. You got 2 kids now, which is amazing. Like, I've got one, and I feel like I'm in over my head, and here you have 2, and again, feel like about an inch tall, but but man, again, I can't say enough about you. I mean, I know that people are going to be helped by this. I know they're going to be blessed. This episode is not, as the scripture, is not going to return void. I think there will be a lot of people that you might be surprised reach out to you and obviously send funds your way, but probably more importantly, like, this could really help. I really think so. And again, I'm glad we kicked off this series about September stories with you. It was good to catch up again, man. And, for anybody out there, again, make sure you hit that subscribe button. YouTube, Apple Podcast, find us on our Facebook group page there at Deeply Rooted. You can also head on over to our website, deeplyrootedpodcast.com. All the archived episodes and stuff on there. Share this one, please. Find somebody that could use this. Share this with these people, not for our sake. We don't make a dime off of this. This is not for profit. I'm not paying Britten. I have no money in this. So if anything, we're going in the red just by doing this.
Yep.
And, we'll laugh about it and have a good time. But obviously, this is for the glory of God. That's period. End of discussion. That's the whole reason we do this podcast and this ministry. I know that's what he's doing there at Shepherd Center in his life and what he's dedicated him to. So, again, appreciate you guys listening. Britten, thank you so much for being on, man. Great to talk to you. Appreciate all the good words. Appreciate the great stories. And until next time, listeners, hope you have a great week in Jesus.